There was a conversation that I'd had in my head for over 20 years around telling my parents the truth. And they reacted in the exact way that I expected them to. What I hadn't prepared for is how I would feel whilst having this conversation. Just to explain, some people might think it's strange that I'm documenting this part within my channel. And often there's a misconception that the only casualty when a survivor has been raped is the survivor. But what I have seen firsthand is the impact this has on the ripple effect of anybody that is close to the survivor: parents, siblings, close friends, even people that you're not necessarily close to can be affected by the story. And when I first broke my silence on LinkedIn, like I've mentioned a few times, I had a lot of emails from people, or DMs, whatever, from people that were saying me too. But a number of those DMs were parents, fathers and mothers saying, "This happened to my daughter. I don't know what to do with her. She's now into a place of depression, or she's dropped out of college, or she's shut down emotionally, or she's using escapism and drinking too much." Whatever the case may be, there were so many different stories of how other people outside the survivor directly were struggling with watching the pain of the survivor and feeling helpless during it. So when it came to telling my parents, there's a little bit of a backstory about me telling my brother first, which I'll put on another video. But basically, once I'd committed in my head that I was going to tell my parents, because for a long time I was very resistant about it, because I didn't want to burden them with it. I knew it would upset them, and I didn't want to put them through that unless it was completely necessary. But at the point when the CPS accepted my case, I knew this is happening and I was going on stand, and there's no way that I could possibly go through that without their knowledge. That would just be disrespectful. And I was also aware that some of my friends from school was aware of this thing happening. And my parents are still friends with some of those friends from school's parents. So it was a horrifying thought to me that for any reason somebody let it slip to one of their parents, who then mentioned it to my parents, and they found out through somebody else. It would just be the most humiliating thing for them. So I thought, I have to tell them ASAP. And I tried to book in a weekend to see them, but their diaries were blocked up, as were mine. And we just couldn't find a weekend that we were both free. So I ended up deciding to do it on Zoom, because once I'd committed to doing this, it became unbearable to wait. It would have been 6 weeks before we actually had a free weekend together. They were in Cumbria and I was in Bristol at the time. So it just felt too long to wait. So I booked in a Zoom call. I needed to break the news to them on my own, but then my brother dialed into the Zoom call about 30, 40 minutes later after they had the news. Now, my sister would have done, but she was tied up in a meeting on that day. But my sister had already known for a couple of decades anyway. She was the first person that I told properly. But this was brand new news to my parents and to my brother. So naturally, there was a lot of talking that needed to happen. And I do remember my words, but basically, I broke it to them, told them that the case had been accepted by CPS and it was happening and I was going up on stand, and then told them that the person that they knew, which was somebody from my childhood, he'd been a regular visitor to the house, had done this to me. And in that very first moment, their reaction was almost identical to what I expected. My mum kind of just sunk her head into her hands and just kind of leant on the table and was just shaking her head, going, "Oh my God, Angie, oh my God, Angie, oh my God." And she kept repeating that. That's all she could say. And I saw my dad, because he was leaning in, because he was curious to what I was about to say. Then I just saw him kind of lean back with a face of shock, and he just went white, just completely white. And then there was just this really unexpected silence for, I don't know how long. It felt like about an hour. It's probably about 3 seconds in reality, where I could see the news sinking in. And as I've mentioned on one of the other videos, at that moment, I wasn't just telling them, they were finding out. So I knew that they were going to feel something quite intense from this news. So in this moment, not only are you carrying your own pain, you're witnessing in real time the pain of two other people that you know love you. And I can't even imagine what was going through their head, because I'd obviously had years and years and years to digest this and get my head around it and do what I needed to do. But this was like a huge bombshell to them. This was like somebody coming in and throwing a hand grenade into their world, because I mean, how does a parent ever feel to find out that their daughter's been raped? It's not the type of news that you feel okay about, and it's not like you're telling them that you've broken your leg and you've got a little bit of bad news. Like, you're telling them something monumental that will make them reflect a lot. I was terrified that they'd beat themselves up. I was worried that they'd blame themselves. I knew that they'd be overwhelmed with, there's an area of, like, obviously grief and sadness and anger. And I can't quite remember the ins and outs of what happened right after that silence, but I remember not long after, my dad's face had gone from white to red. And he naturally had some choice words about what he'd do if he got hold of him. But understandably, you're talking about a father that's just found out that his daughter was raped by a man that he knew. I spent a lot of time with my mum, also one-to-one. We spent time talking late into the evenings, many a time. I saw a lot of tears. I saw a lot of grief. And it's really difficult as a daughter to watch that and watch your parents go through that. And I think the hardest part for them, they knew him as well, and they felt foolish by being fooled by his front. But in their defense, there's so many people that we knew as a family, like other families knew him too. The swimming club knew him. Everybody respected him. He was the life and soul of most, you know, get-togethers or parties or events that he'd organise. And anybody, you could argue the fact that anybody that has trusted this guy, even from 1996 when this happened to me, people that have been to the pub with him, people that have worked with him, people that have spent time with him, I doubt many of those people would actually want to spend time with somebody if they knew what they were like behind closed doors. But like everybody else that we knew, and he was a quite a well-known character in the community, people trusted him and liked him. He was very accommodating, very smiley and everything else. But now they knew the truth. They started questioning their own judgment and started questioning themselves and potentially beating themselves up, which is what I dreaded in telling them, which is what I was trying to avoid by holding it back for so long. But it got to the point where actually there was only one way forward, and that was the truth. There was never a second when I doubted that they would question me, not believe me, judge me in any way. That was never ever the concern whatsoever. The main concern I had is knowing that they'd feel devastated by it. I didn't want them to feel the pain that I could then see. And this is why I'm making this video, because if anybody else goes to court because they've been violated, and even if they don't go to court and they still choose to tell their family, the ripple effect from this particular sexual assault isn't just on the survivor. It is far, far beyond that. And I think that is one of the most underestimated parts. And as a family, we had to pull through it for at least 2 years. But from the point when I told them up until the point when we went to court, and we had to manage that together. There was endless conversations. That particular Zoom call lasted about 5 hours, 6 hours or something like that. There was tears, there was anger, there was overwhelm, there was, disbelief, not disbelief in me, but just like, oh my God, I can't believe we're faced with this. I can't believe we're having to go through this because it's so painful. So from that moment onwards, they were rigidly right by my side whenever I needed them. We had conversations that literally we sat up all night talking. We'd start talking, it would come up in conversation. It might start about 10 o'clock at night, and we'd be still sat there at 6 o'clock in the morning in the living room talking about it. There was just so much to say. There was so much emotion to expose. There was so much, grief and sadness and anger and just all the emotions. And it was really hard watching my parents go through that. But it was also, unfortunately, necessary in order for them to be aware of what actually did happen. The alternative was to just keep it quiet forever. But I can't deny there was this huge amount of relief from my side. And it's a double-edged sword, really, because there was relief from my side that I'd finally got the chance to tell them, and it was finally out in the open, and I'd buried this and considered this conversation for years and years and years. But there's no way you can break news like that without it coming with a turmoil of grief and devastation and all the other emotions I've mentioned as well. And my family aren't an isolated family. Everybody that has ever been violated, the moment they tell somebody that loves them and that they love, it can't not have a knock-on effect. I mean, the thought of this happening to my sister or my mum or somebody in my family that I love, it would send me into a place of rage, but you kind of get used to it as a survivor, just knowing that it happened to you. But I understand why other people, they want to take that pain away for you, but simultaneously, I want to take that pain away from them. So everybody's there worried about each other's emotions, but there's no other way around it. You have to go into that space and you have to deal with those emotions. Otherwise, you end up in a place of just numbing it and then it doesn't heal at all. So it's changed a lot of things with my family that just, I remember one time I said to a friend that it's helped almost become more closer to them. Now, that isn't to say I wasn't close to them before, but as long as this secret was buried, a secret that I knew that if they knew about, it would change the nature of our relationship. And I said that once to a friend, and my friend is gay. And she really, really understood what I meant because she said the same thing. She said she's always had a good relationship with her parents. She's always, enjoyed spending time with them. But until they knew that she was gay, she couldn't really, truly be herself with them. It's not that anything was wrong with the relationship, but I couldn't truly, truly be myself because I just knew that it would change the whole dynamic of our relationship once this was out, once this was known, and once my secret was no longer a secret anymore. This conversation was by far the second hardest part of the whole 6 years. The first hardest part was calling the police initially. That was, without question, the part that was the most overwhelming for me. This was the second most difficult. And the build up to it was enormous. The anxiety, the worry, the fear of how they'd react in a way that they'd feel so upset. It's absolutely great now. Like obviously we don't talk about it too much. We're not in that place anymore, but I knew it would come as a massive bombshell. And this is, I guess, as I said at the beginning, I'm raising awareness around this, that I've seen firsthand the reaction on my sister when I told her, the reaction on my brother when I told him, the reaction on my mum and dad when I told them. Nobody's just going to sit there and go, oh, yeah, thanks for telling me, but in a casual way. Like it's very, very deep and it causes a lot of deep emotions. And I think that gets overlooked and underestimated when it comes to going through something like this, particularly when you're going to court, because I then knew that my parents would undoubtedly want to be there to support me. And then they were going to have to sit through their own daughter's rape trial with the guy that did it from so long ago. They'd have to see my video interview, my ABE, they'd have to listen to the full story. And for that, and at that moment, once there was no more secrets, like this is the only thing I'd kept back from my parents. Once there was no more secrets, I told them literally everything. I don't think there's a stone unturned in terms of the detail in which I've shared. So I guess I'm just wanting to reach out to anybody out there that is a parent. If you happen to watch this, I see you and I hear you. This is a very difficult thing to have to stomach when it's somebody that you care about that has gone through something like this. And one of the motivations in these videos is to make content about the parts that nobody talks about. Everybody becomes very aware of the pain of the survivor. Very few people talk about the pain of the survivor's family and the survivor's close friends. And that's not a reason not to tell them. My only regret in any of this is that I didn't tell them sooner. Now I've told them, it's obvious to me I should have done it sooner, but that was a judgment call that I've learned from. But like I said, it's not a reason not to tell them, but it is a part that I think is worth mentioning and raising awareness around. So I guess I'll just wrap up with saying if you are a parent that happens to be watching this and if this has happened to your daughter or even your son, doesn't have to be female. But what really helped me as a survivor is how supportive my parents were and how there was never any shadow of doubt of anything I was saying. And it would have been much harder if either of them had challenged me on any of the story, which they didn't. So I guess if you are a parent, just go at their pace and be with them and be as supportive and believing of the whole thing as my parents were, because it makes all the difference.